Alright, for the next step, we're going to be using the MVC model and applying it into building our web application. And this part has also been covered by Philip, so I'm just going to break down the steps as individuals. So firstly, we're going to create a controller. If you remember, a controller is kind of like a waiter. So we're going to use the same analogy to understand the steps that follow. The first step you would want to do is to generate a controller with name home. So that's the command for it, and it will be kind of like hiring a waiter and his name is home. So we're going to do that. Let's go back, and then we are going to generate a controller and his name is home. And you will see all these things being created for you, and yeah, that's basically what it is. After that, you're gonna access this controller, and then you're gonna define an action called index. And under that action, you're gonna use your Ruby language, you remember, to create an instance variable, which is basically a variable that is local to the class that it's in this case index, and to store the words hello world. And this is equivalent to telling the waiter that the instruction, if you tell him do instruction name index, he's going to say, oh, okay, that means saying hello world. So how this will look like would be, let's see, oops, I clicked the wrong button. Okay, how this will look like, we're going to go into app, and then you'll see that that's where our controller folder is. And then our controller folder, you'll find, oh, it did create our little home controller, or our waiter name home. So we're going to do what you did the last time. We are going to define an action, and this action is going to be named index. Under that action, we're going to state that this instance variable is going to equate to hello world. And then we're going to remember to end that. Alright, and we're going to save it. Okay, now let's go back. Now you are going to create a view for the controller, and this will be equivalent to creating a menu. Now, you're going to remember that with every controller, there needs to be a view. So for the waiter to do his job, he will need a menu for the customer to read so that they can point out what they want to eat. You're going to create a new file or menu called index.html.erb in views home. So as you can see, the syntax for this, it's html.erb, not just HTML, even though that's what the pages that you've been creating so far in front end. Because you're basically saying, ERB stands for Ruby, you're basically saying this is HTML encoded in Ruby. So okay, now we're going to try that. We are first going to go to views, and then see, we have this little home guy, but there's nothing in it. So you're going to create a file, and you're going to name it index.html.erb. Let's open that file. So as you can see, there's nothing in it because you haven't put anything in it. So now you're gonna start creating the menu, and this you will revisit all your front end knowledge. You're gonna specify the doc type, and then what I want you to do is to basically put in header 1, and then borrow whatever action that you had in your controller, and to render it in your view page. So as your view file, it's written in HTML. So you can see here, see HTML encoded in Ruby. You want to reference any code written in Ruby language within this parentheses. So it's a very specific parentheses, as you can see. So what you're basically doing here, you're listing on a menu that, oh, there is an action that I can pick that will basically ask the waiter to say hello world to me. So let's go ahead and do that. Type H. Then remember to close that. Right. And within that, you're gonna go, okay. And I'm gonna say I want to access this variable. We're gonna close it. You're gonna save that. Alright. And that's for creating the view. Now, before you can view it, you want to route the default page to this new page that you did. And this is basically assigning the bell to the waiter. You're basically what you're doing, if you access the config routes.ruby file, this is basically the router that determines where to send requests that comes in and from the browser. So let's go find the file, and here it is. So right now, there's nothing much to it, right? So we are gonna go back to that, and what we want to do is to root home parent index. So what this means is that the root command, you're basically routing it to the default page, and the default page is basically the first page that you go onto for when you access a website URL like this, and then there's nothing comes after it. So if you just go onto the website, that's kind of like your home page. And since you've already defined an action in your controller with a desired string of words hello world, we need to tell Rails to use that action instead of returning the default page of hello Rails, which is what we what we saw here. We don't want to see this. So now it's kind of equivalent to changing the default response of ringing the bell. So instead of ringing the bell and then you go to the customer and then you pull up the sign, oh hey, you're on Rails, you now want to connect that with the waiter and to tell him to specifically say hello world to the customer. So yeah, that's what we are going to do. Yeah, over here, yeah, it basically guides you on routing so you can access this. But root index pound, oh, oops, world. So, alright, so that's this, what is this? And then you're now going to run the application to test. So same thing when you run, just click run now. Now you don't need to set anything because everything is set up. I'm going to pop it out. And you see, let's say hello world. So there you got it. Lastly, oh, let's stop it first. Okay. Now we're going to go on to creating a model, which is what Philip guided you through. However, because it was a very preliminary session, we didn't connect this model to anything that you saw in the controller and the view, just because we didn't really have the right context to do it yet, but you will be visiting that in scaffolding later on when I teach it to you. So just keep in mind this database that we're creating has no connection to the hello world things that we did. So if you remember, your model is kind of like a chef, but because this chef and his fridge. Okay, the model is the chef and the database is the fridge. But the thing is, when you generate this command, Rails G model student, you're basically generating a database table and you're gonna name him student, which is kind of like hiring a chef and saying your name is student. What this does, it automatically migrates your new database. So it automatically, if you hire the chef, it comes with a 1-for-1 bundle of a fridge. And if, yeah, your fridge is named student law. So yeah, what migrate means, it's a terminology used in Ruby on Rails. And what it means is that you are basically making changes to the schema of your database. So basically the structure of your database. So let's go ahead and create that. Oh, does it always do this? Create that model. I'm gonna name it student. And so it has created all these things. As you can see, it has automatically generated a migration, so we don't need to do that. And you will be able to see this migration in your database. I will explain the syntax of the database migration later, so don't worry about the numbers. And it has also created a model. Okay, let's go back to app. Let's close this so you can see models. And you'll see that you have it right here, student, right? Okay. You're going to run the app and view the database by adding Rails/database in the URL. So this is pretty interesting. Remember that gem Rails_DB that you previously kind of installed? So you will be able to see your database live. Because of that. Oh. Okay. Okay, there is a little error, and let's stop that first. Okay, I missed out this point. You will have to run a database migration even though they already created a migration for you. So yeah, now you have a migrated database. So I will add that new step in the slides, so don't worry about that. But now we're gonna run that again and check it out. Okay, it's gonna bring us to hello world again, but right now what we want to see is the database. So we are gonna do this, and the gem basically lets it see what we have. And this is the database that we basically created. Students model, students database, and right now we have ID, we have a timestamp for both created at and updated at. Obviously we have no records as of now, but yeah, it's basically the database that we just ran. Now you're gonna stop the running application. Stop that first. Oh, what? And what you're going to do right now is to change the schema of your database, because currently what we have, it's just like these things, these columns, and it really doesn't say much for students. And in the class, in Philip's class, you basically said that for a student you would need UID and names. So now we're going to add those two with these two lines. So firstly, I want to address how migrations is stored as files in the db migrate directory, the one that I basically showed you. Database migrate, right? So it's this one. Yeah, and as you can see, there are all these weird numbers. So what it is that it's basically the timestamp, your month, date, and the UTC time for it. So you know exactly when you changed your database, if you did change your database. So now we're going to add the text columns, name and UID to the database table. And that's kind of like adding two additional food organizers, named name and UID in the student page for organizational purposes. Just to note, text is a data type that you want to assign to the column, but it's not the only data type. There are loads of other data types, so you can put other types of data in that, and you can kind of access this HTML to check it out. So right now, what we want to do, so right now I did click on the migration file, and what we want to do, so right now it has timestamps, right? But we want more, so we are going to add more. We're going to put name, and we are going to put, the UID, alright, and we're going to save that. So after that, obviously, you want to run the migration. Well, you want to run the migration, basically update the new database. But before that, you want to drop the contents of the database first. So basically throwing out our contents of the student fridge is kind of like when we reorganize a room. You take everything out first and then you put new stuff in. So if you're wondering what RIG stands for, it stands for Ruby Make. So yeah, very creative. Let's go back to that. So I'm going to drop the database. Boop. And yeah, it dropped the database. And now we're going to migrate the database. So basically updating the database. And now, if we run the application again, right? Should be able to see. Okay. A new and updated database with your name and your UID. Okay. And that's basically it. It's the end of part 3, and now feel free to take a 10-minute break before we start on a completely new topic, scaffolding and the CRUD model.